Hello. I'm making another video. You get the gist at this point, right? Like, comment, subscribe, blah blah blah. I'm gonna give you a basic rating off the start, and then go into why I gave it that rating. The one I'm talking about today is Being Raised by Villains. It's like a cutesy, I don't know, like one of those stories where like the main character's all downtrodden and then they get like a family and it's all sweet and it's like, ah. It is an isekai, I'm gonna be honest, because yes, I just have to review all the isekais. Um, uh, yeah, but I mean, I think it's a fun isekai. Hey, this is Future Inc. I think I forgot to put the rating at the start of the series. If you're really curious, I think the general gist of the rating is probably somewhere between a 7 and an 8, depending on your preferences. My preferences kind of lean it this way at times, but I think if you're really into you know, like more cutesy stories and things like that, I think you could go the other way for sure. Also, if you haven't read as many stories as I have, then you might like this side. You know, you might be closer to this side. I think there are some moments where it's a little bit, you know, I've seen this before, but I don't know you. This is the main character. It's Here's what I'll say. I think the art's pretty solid. I like the art. Not like stand out like it's super good, but I like it. As far as character designs go, you know, they're pretty generic. You know, but these hair colors and things like that are kind of basic, but whatever, right? Basic isn't bad. It's just as long as it's basic done relatively well, I'm okay with it. Just to the story, she gets reincarnated in this world as a character that really doesn't matter. She's basically going to be kicked out right off the bat, but, you know, due to a lucky encounter with this guy, who likes to just, I don't know, he's one of those one of those major characters where it's always like, I need something to do, I'm bored all the time. And he's like, oh wow, you're silly. Like, I'll adopt you as my daughter, and then, you know, when you're boring, I'll just throw you out in the streets or whatever. But, you know, the main character has that that chance encounter, and then ends up kind of being more involved in the family, and I'm not going to get into the details, but ends up slowly, you know, growing on her family, and then they actually want to, you know, be a real family to her. You know, basic idea. And then, you know, as far as, like, little elements, she's like a shapeshifter, and she can turn into this quote-unquote lizard. I won't get into that anymore, but lizard. Okay, maybe I'll get into it a little bit. I'll say this. I think they're setting up something relatively interesting. I'll leave some clues here. Their family just so happens to have dragon's blood in it, and she just so happens to turn into a lizard. I feel like you can kind of guess where things are going. And this is early on, so I'm not spoiling anything. But I think that's like the fun aspect of the series, like the whole like, oh, she's a shapeshifter and no one else is like that, and you know, her family has like prejudice towards shapeshifters and things like that. But they ended up, you know, slowly liking her. The whole idea of the dragon's blood, by the way, they mentioned it relatively early on, but the family, like the more pure blood members of the family, like this guy, go into like a rage if they're, you know, if certain conditions are met because of their dragon's blood, and that's like one of the key plot points early on. That's the general gist for these two characters. You know, he's like, you know, basically he's the cold character that slowly becomes, you know, more accepting of the main character, and eventually, you know, thinks of the main character as like his actual daughter and cares for her and everything. Which is like, you know, it's sweet. It's like, oh, she's had a rough life and now he's caring for her. That's cute. As far as other characters go, she has two brothers. To be honest, nothing really happens with this one. Like, he's there, but he doesn't really do much. And this one is kind of like a plot device. Like, they pretty much just use this one to get things done in the story, and he really doesn't have, like... I don't know, like, he doesn't have a lot of character development outside of he's smart. Which was kind of like, okay. I don't know. Neither of them are fleshed out that well. I mean, I would say both of them are pretty forgettable. This is like, you know, of course, it's the grandfather figure, like the, you know, old guy that's really harsh and cold on the outside, but he's a sweetheart on the inside. You know, it's the basic figure. Right, like he can't be honest with his feelings, and he actually thinks like, oh my god, she's adorable, and I'd love to have a granddaughter, but I can't show it. Basic, you know, nothing special. Other than that, the next prominent character after the grandfather... Okay. You know what? I'm actually going to save this character for the end, because I think it's probably the biggest negative for this series. But keep this character in mind. I'll say this while I'm here. Most of the writing for the first like 30 chapters I like. It's you know, it's not anything deep, but it's like, oh, okay, this is like a sweet, you know, just like, oh, she's slowly making, you know, a name for herself, and, you know, everyone's starting to grow more attached, and now they think like, oh, she's a real member of the family, and it's like, oh, this is sweet. This character is where that shifts a little bit, and I have my things to say about that, but for now, let's just talk about some other things. This is the original character because it is an isekai. This is the original character from, you know, the book that she read, right? I will say, I kind of like how this series does this character a little more than some other series, and I'll say the reason for that is, typically it's like, oh, the main character is actually like a villain. In this series, like, she actually likes the, you know, the new main character, and she kind of thinks of her as like, you know, a little sister, and it's like, oh, you know, they actually like each other. That's a shocker. It's not really a common thing for these stories. And as far as like characters go, I mean, she doesn't have much of a personality, I'll be honest. It's basically just she likes the new main character. That's pretty much her personality. So I can't really say too much on her. She's relatively basic. Yeah, I mean, I think all this leads to like, I don't know. Like, there's other characters that show up, like this guy's relatively plain Jane. I kind of like some of the interactions he has with other characters that are, you know, that come along later, but he's relatively middle of the road. Other than that, okay, yeah, I think those are the other ones to cover. This character is... he's meant to be like that obsessive, like, you're my first friend, so you're my only friend, and you can't have any friends, and, you know, things like that. He's really just not entertaining. And you stick with him for, like, I don't know exactly, I didn't count out how many chapters, but it feels like, I don't know, a good like third of what I read, which is like, I don't know, like 60 chapters. It's this character for like maybe a third of that, and it's so annoying. It's like, it's unbelievable. Like, he is just one of those characters that's like, it's grating. Like, I do not like this character. Like, it's so like, oh, like, can we move on? And you don't get like a break from it. They just switch it up like at a certain point in the story, and then you just have to put up with this character when you're used to all the other characters being, you know, in and out of the story, and the main character interacting with those ones, and then you just have this guy, and it's like, if you don't like him, you're not going to like this entire section of the story. It does move on past this like this portion at some point, but it's like, the fact that you even have to, you know, get through it is enough to be like, okay, like, this is annoying. It was just a very frustrating, like, oh my god, like, just, can we move on? And it felt like it never ended. But like, this character is just like torturous. I don't like his personality. He's like one of those, yeah, like I said, he's like that obsessive, like annoying type. And but he's like a childish version of that, which is even more annoying. And it's like, oh my god, can we just do something else? And I would say that is one of the biggest negatives of the series. Like everything else, I feel like is relatively plain, but it does it in a fun way. So I'm like okay with it. I even think it's pretty good. But his character is just like, oh my god, please stop. And this is one of those times when like you really see like how a series can just shift in a moment's notice. Of course, when I make a lot of these videos, my point is just to get you like a general rating off, you know, like the early section of a series to see if it seems like it's going in a good direction. But, you know, I try to read as much as I can just to get like a better gist of where things are going. But this is like one of those times you can really see how like the beginning doesn't always, you know, lead to a good ending. And it's like, wow, this is it. Like he is awful. Very, very annoying character. I just extremely unlikable. And then, like, you know, they introduce like, other characters later on that I think carry it a little bit better than him, and they do move away from him a little bit, but, like, such a bad part of the series. But, overall, I mean, I don't have much else to say other than this. I mean, I would say it's a solid series. I enjoyed it. For the most part, again, there is a little portion in the middle of those chapters that I read that was a little rough with that character, but for the most part, it's a pretty enjoyable series. My idea is if you can get through that part and you don't mind that type of character, it's probably an 8. If that part really, really sticks, then it's probably a 7 for you. Overall, I mean, it's a fun series, but like there are certain elements that make it a little bit of a slog at times. But for the most part, I think it is enjoyable. And I think although none of the characters are, you know, super unique, I think it at least is fun and interesting. Like it doesn't like it's one of those series where the entertainment value I think goes ahead of like the actual like quality in some cases. Like I wouldn't necessarily say this is a series that you're going to love and come back to and it's your favorite series ever, but I think you'll enjoy it overall. But yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. You know, maybe leave a story that you want me to read down below. If, you know, even if I already read it, I'll read it again and I can talk about it. So, yeah, I think that's about it. I'll see ya.